Welcome to a CNBC Africa special panel discussion today, and we'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on Africa's aviation sector and the potential way forward. Now, for some context, Africa's aviation sector could lose $6 billion of passenger revenue compared to 2019. Now, that's according to IATA. Now, that is $2 billion more than what was expected at the beginning of the pandemic. Now, the fallout from the impact of COVID-19 could lead to a 3.1 million job losses in aviation and related industries. Now, that is half of the region's 6.2 million aviation-related employment. On this panel, we are joined by Mr. Abderahmane Berthe. He's the Secretary General of the African Airlines Association. We are also joined by Mr. Nseko. He's the Managing Director of Ifly Aviation, and Patrick Nkulikiyimfura, Managing Director of Akagera Aviation. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen, and thank you for making the time. I want to start with you, Mr. Secretary General. Quickly, just give us an assessment based of the reports that you've been making regarding the impact of the pandemic on some of your members in the airline sector on the continent.
Thank you, Arnold, for having me on this panel. I thank CNBC for organizing this panel, and I would like also to thank my co-panelists on this. And I would like just to adjust some numbers. You know, the contribution of aviation sector to the economies in Africa for 2018 is $63 billion and 7.7 million jobs. And we are seeing with the COVID-19 a drop of activity. At AFRAA, we are making an assessment every month. Our last assessment in November is showing $9 billion loss of revenues for African airlines. So the figures are growing since the starting of the beginning. The $6 billion you gave was made by IATA on May. So since the figures are going up. From January to November, we have seen a drop of capacity of 52% in Africa. So if you look at this drop of capacity, it means that we have 3.7 million jobs at risk and a loss of economic contribution of $30 billion. So we are seeing a recovery since July after the opening of borders, but since it's very, very, very low, in August, for example, we have seen that only 30% of the level of capacities we have seen last year on the same month in August are really on the market. And the load factors are very, very low. For August, it was 32.75%, which is far lower than the break-even load factor of airline. And also, we are making an assessment of the number of routes reopened by airlines since the COVID-19. For November, we have seen that only 68% of routes has reopened compared to February. It was a bit higher in September. In September, it was 74%. In October, it dropped at 71%. In November, we are at 68%. You know that the second wave is coming. And also, we think that airlines are readapting their network and their activity to the situation and the evolution of the COVID-19. So the impact on the aviation sector is very, very huge, and we'll have opportunity, I think, to talk about how to survive and how to recover after the COVID-19.
I want to bring Derek Nseko, MD Ifly Aviation, into this conversation. Derek, you've heard the Secretary General's remarks. Do you echo the same sentiment?
Yeah, and first of all, I just want to thank you and echo his thanks as well. Thank you so much for having us, and also for the panelists for joining us. And what I'd like to echo actually from what he said was just to re-emphasize the importance of aviation to Africa. And from the numbers that he gave, aviation contributes about 3% to the GDP across the entire African continent. It contributes over 2.2% of the employment on the entire African continent. So this is something that we have to emphasize because Africa needs to understand the importance of travel. I think we do more now in the context of COVID-19, which has really highlighted that aviation is at the center of economic activity, not just in Africa, but across the globe. So it's safe to say, though, that COVID has reinvented travel, and it's something that we have to accept as we pave a way forward with our industry. Now, the appetite for travel in Africa has always been held back by restrictions. We've got restrictions in visa policies, we've got restrictions that come about due to high fees. Now, just to put it in the context of COVID-19, it's much more expensive to travel now because of all the, not just the policies, but because of everything that you have to do to just get onto an aircraft and to move from point A to point B. So travel has become a much more difficult prospect for Africans as we go forward. So we need to find ways to not just even make it more efficient, but to make it cheaper for Africans to travel in order to boost the aviation industry and to move closer to what we refer to as a recovery.
I want to bring Mr. Patrick into the conversation as the managing director of Akagera Aviation. Just let's look at it from the impact on Akagera specifically. What kind of hit have you been feeling over the past 8 months?
First of all, thank you, Arnold, and your team for having us on this important topic. And I also thank the panelists who have joined us. The impact we had was severe, like the other panelists mentioned. You know, we 98% of our clients come from the US and the UK, and our clients are usually into the luxury segments of the tourism industry. So there are the two countries that were the most hit by the pandemic, and the average age that they have is 60. So the chance of them traveling back again soon is very limited due to the fact that we are going through a second phase as well. A second phase for the COVID. So it's difficult, but we have to be innovative and survive this crisis that is unprecedented. We are trying to put up other measures in order to play a role on the regional basis. We plan to go to Tanzania and other countries in the region and try to be innovative and sell our services. Government has been helpful in some ways, as they can, but at the same time, you have to understand that this industry is what extremely hardly hit, like the Secretary General just reminded us.
Patrick, since the reopening and the resumption of flights in some countries, Rwanda was one of the first countries to open up airports. Has business picked up? What are you doing differently to ensure survival in such a time?
It's slowly picking up, but it's very slowly. Nothing compared to what we have seen in the past. It will take some time. That's why we need to be innovative and try to go regional when it comes to our marketing strategy, and see what we can play as a role, whether it's on maintenance of aircraft, whether it's on training for pilot cadets, whether it's for selling our services when it comes to emergency evacuation in the region, and see how it comes. That's what we're doing. We're trying to be innovative. We're trying to be we're not sitting down and waiting for the people to come back. We're trying to keep all our staff. Of course, salary are cut as normal, but we are trying to push as much as possible for the products to continue existing and selling on the regional market. That's what we do.
Thank you, Patrick. Mr. Abderahmane, what could some of the industry players do to ensure not only survival during this period, but also enable them to bounce back to previous heights?
We think that we will not reach the levels of traffic of 2019 before end of 2023. I want before to say something about the tourism sector. You know that in Africa, the intra-Africa activity is starting, but for intercontinental, it's another different thing, because most of the regions are closing. Unfortunately, the intra-African tourism is not so much developed. We depend on non-African tourists. And, we have the travel ban from the European Union currently. Only residents from Rwanda, in fact, are authorized to travel to Europe currently. So on that, AFRAA is working with African Union Commission. But we think that stakeholders need really to put in place some multi-form financial support to aviation sector, because the big crisis today is on financial side. And for that, we are urging government to put in place a set of measures which can be economic stimulus to aviation sector, as we have seen in other regions globally. Some measure on tax and some cost relief measures, and also employment related measures. And also we think that it's very, very important to have an harmonization of health screening protocols, and the mutual recognition from one country to another. Because in Africa, we are 54 states, and sometimes the protocols are different from one state to another. This is not bringing confidence to passengers to travel. And also, we in Africa, we have regarding the testing, the PCR tests, we have different scales of fees. Some countries are requesting more than $150 for testing. Some are starting at $30 or $50. This also will impact the activity of airlines. And something very, very important for the restoration of the business is the connectivity. We have seen at AFRAA in October compared to before the COVID-19 in February, we have seen a drop of connectivity by 90%. So one of the concerns today is really to have a good connectivity. For that also at AFRAA, we are working to see where are the gaps and see how our member airlines can work together to that we can have a very good connectivity within the continent. Of course, at AFRAA, we have been making a lot of initiatives since the beginning of the pandemic. We have launched an appeal in March to African government to support their airlines. And we are also making this COVID-19 assessment every month. And in April also, we work out after the webinar on a 9-pillar recovery plan for our members and stakeholders. So how to come out from the COVID-19 situation. And also, I have to say that in May, African Union Commission put in place a high-level task force, and the AFRAA participated to this task force to see how to sustain aviation sector for survival and recovery. And two very important recommendations were made by the task force. The first one is states to put aviation sector as a priority sector. And secondly, to put in place a $25 billion to support the aviation sector. And also at AFRAA, we made an appeal with other international organizations in May to put in place $10 billion to support the travel industry, including tourism sector also. So I think it's a ongoing work. A lot needs to be done during the next months to support the sector. I'm not talking only about airlines, because in aviation we have also some other sectors concerned like hotels, tourism sectors, and also all those sectors need really to be supported by government. Because as we said at the beginning, aviation sector is a big contributor to the African economy.
Okay, bringing you back into the conversation. Derek, the Secretary General was calling for government intervention. We've already seen about 4 airlines on the continent shut down during this pandemic period. Just the other day in your country, we had the Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, coming out to ask publicly, that's on Twitter, if South Africa actually needs a national airline. Now, my question to you will be, aren't there too many players in the sector for the market at the moment?
That's a very interesting question. And just to highlight what the Secretary General said, just to get back a little bit, regarding the African Union, the task force and the funding that has been allocated for, the funding that has been raised for the aviation industry, which is a very, very positive move. From what I've learned, though, apparently the funding will be allocated to individual states and not just specific airlines. That just causes a little bit of worry because, especially in the context of what Arnold just said right now in regards to Minister Tito Mboweni, I think our governments, we need to advocate more. We need to continue to highlight the importance. I don't think some of our governments in Africa truly understand the importance of the aviation industry. So the confidence is very little that if that funding is allocated to governments, enough of it will be pushed into the aviation sector, which so badly needs it. And the other worry from that point of view should be that in these states that have national airlines, how much of this money is going to go to privately owned airlines and not just to prop up the national airlines, which, as we know, are the ones that are not well run in some of these countries. So that's just a bit of a worry there. And I just hope that in this industry we can have something more aligned and something, an initiative that can truly benefit every player across the landscape of the airline industry.
Mr. Patrick, bring you back into the conversation. It's a cloudy morning here in Kigali. But could there be a silver lining for the aviation sector as a result of maybe potential opportunities coming through from this pandemic?
Good questions. I think we need to complement on what Derek was saying. We need to synergize much more than we did in the past in order for us to survive. not only as the national airlines, but also as the entire, you need to look at the aviation sector as a whole, as the aviation sector industry as a whole, and take advantage of those relief funds, but at the same time, have a really big synergy. It's not business as usual. We need to be working together more. We need to be helping each other more if we want the sector to be stronger in the future. We see a lot of individual type of initiative, many by airlines or other players in the industry. But what is needed more is really synergies, economic of scale, for us to be able to survive in the long term.
Derek, how do we survive? What are the opportunities for the industry?
Well, first of all, I believe we need to learn to work together. I think previously, before this crisis, that was one of the main issues across the aviation industry. We have a very fragmented aviation industry. And as you alluded to earlier, I didn't really answer your question. Yes, we do have so many airlines across a very restricted African airspace. And if we do not work together, we cannot optimize the opportunities that are within the aviation industry. At the moment, the opportunity is very small because travel is at an all-time low. There's very few people moving from point A to B. We have airlines, most of the airlines have their planes packed. Airlines are restructuring and they're trimming their fleets, they're trimming their route networks. So for me, the important thing is to work together. I think it's a good time as well to revisit the kind of initiatives that move us forward into that direction. The Secretary General alluded earlier to the fact that traffic in Africa largely depends on foreign carriers. In fact, 35%, only 35% of the major hubs in Africa are actually connected to one another. Intra-African connectivity is extremely poor, and we need to create our own travel bubble within Africa right now, especially in the context of the fact that there might be a second wave of the coronavirus. We do not know if there will be a third phase. There could be a fourth phase. We cannot continue to look at intercontinental travel. We cannot continue to look at foreign carriers and depend on them to boost our own industry. We are very lucky in Africa that in the past few months, we have actually responded to this crisis from a health perspective. We've responded better. So we are better positioned to create our own travel bubble within this continent. And this is the best opportunity now to improve the intra-African connectivity that can push us forward. And when we look at initiatives like SETEM that have been very, very sluggish, the single African air transport market, this is now the best opportunity to accelerate such initiatives on the African continent.
Derek, just there in your closing remarks, you're talking about the single African air transport market. This has been in conversation since 1988, right? Operationalization of this with the coming in of AFCFTA in early January. Is it something that we can actually count on to happen?
It is something that we truly hope that we can count on. I'd like to think that this is not a baton that I'm going to pass on to the next generation. We have to keep advocating. And I believe the aviation bodies within Africa, and Mr. Berthe can allude to this, between AFRAA, AFCAC, and IATA, that significant work is being done to accelerate. I believe there was an initiative recently that was just launched as a safety initiative that will also continue to boost our progress towards SATAM. The various issues that are in contest that countries are not happy with, issues like dispute settlement. I think we've taken steps towards that. So more countries are coming on board, and I think at the moment there is enough countries that have signed up for SATEM for it to really be realized within that group. So I believe the time is now.
Secretary General, you have 1 minute for your closing remarks. What's the way forward?
I think the way forward is, for me, first, to build a resilient air transport system in Africa. Because you see African Airlines have been losing money for 10 consecutive years. And we also need to implement as soon as possible the 3 flagship projects of the African Union Commission, namely the SATAM. It will take time, but it cannot be reversed. And the African Continental Free Trade Area, because African states are not trading among themselves enough, only 16%. And the project, the goal is to bring it to 52% by 2022. And also the restrictions on visa. Today, 49% of African citizens need visa when they want to travel to another African country. So we need really to create an conducive environment for air transport. Also, we didn't talk about it, but we have a high-cost environment also in Africa. So those challenges need really to be tackled by all the stakeholders, all the industry. And I'm optimistic because the growth rates of air transports in Africa is very, very big. It will be shifted due to the COVID-19, but it will happen in next years.
And finally, Mr. Patrick, in your closing remarks, what's the way forward for Akagera Aviation?
Train more people because it keeps the aircraft in the air. Build capacity building to the maximum. We need so many skilled people in our industry. I believe that the numbers for next year only in pilot demand were around 270,000. So the thing is that we need to train people. At least that will keep our aircraft in the air. We need to train people. We need to train aircraft maintenance personnel. We need to train more dispatch people. We need to train people in airline operations for us to be much more better prepared for these difficult times and grow with it. Without trained, skilled capacity building strategy in this difficult moment, who will be there to fly those aircraft? Who will be there to maintain those aircraft? Who will be there also to ensure that our level of professionalism earned by us is put in place by us? We need to train, and hopefully, I'm sure we are confident that that's something positive. Africa will bounce back when it comes to the aviation industry, and we will grow again.
Thank you to our panel of experts for making the time. If you want to comment on this topic, tweet us at CNBC Africa. Have a great day.